Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce Bethany Seeger. She's the digital software developer for the Frost Library at Amherst College. And she's here to tell us about open access publishing using WordPress. And she has this concept of connecting their digital repository to WordPress in her dreams.
In her dreams at some point.
But it is possible, I promise you.
Anything is possible, right?
Please help us welcome Bethany.
Hi. Thank you, and thanks for coming to the session. So I come from Amherst College, and a little bit about Amherst College, I'll start with that. It's a small liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts. You may have heard of it. It has about 1,800 students, and it has, so I'm part of the library there, technically. It was a new position carved out a few years ago to help manage the digital repository, as well as help manage this particular WordPress site I'm going to be talking about. And I am the solo IT person in the library right now. There are other groups on campus, and I interface with them, and it works out well. But so basically, that is to say that when it comes to working on a site like this, there's one person working on it, and it's.
What's the digital repository?
Oh, good question. I'll talk a little bit about it. It's basically where a lot of our archives and special collection material, we have been digitizing it and putting it online so that people can access it remotely. We have a lot of Emily Dickinson's writing available there, and so now people can come and see that without actually having to come into our archives at the school. And definitely feel free to ask questions throughout. I welcome that. So I was thinking about this talk a few days ago while I was out in the barn milking a goat. We have a few goats, and one thing you do when you milk goats is you think about things, and it entered my mind. It entered my mind about how does open access compare to goats and having goats. So I apologize, it's after lunch, you might be a little bit tired, but my real presentation is open access publishing, WordPress, and goats. So I want to talk about open access publishing at Amherst College. A little bit about what open access is in general. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with it working in higher ed. We're always trying to get information out there to people. The features that a press might need and what we've needed, we'll look a little bit at our system set up at Amherst College, what we're currently doing, and also teach you a little bit about goats as we go through this. So I'm a software developer, as was mentioned. I work on 3 websites, so I feel like I have to it's a little confession, I only work on 3 websites. I've seen a lot of people today who talk about maybe the 400 to 600 that they manage, which is really impressive and makes this seem kind of really, really small. But that's fine. It's working on a press. This particular press is a nascent venture. And while it's one of the things I work on, I also work on the WordPress, which is another open access web publishing website for open access publishing, excuse me. It's established by the libraries of more than 40 liberal arts colleges, grouping together to support open access. So their intention is to produce digitally native, peer-reviewed scholarship and get that out into the world. So the WordPress is also another WordPress website that's shown up here on the right-hand side. That site currently requires very little work. They're still bringing together WordPress, and that's going to be a portal website, much like the Amherst College Press website is, and I'll go into a little more details about that. And the other site, which is a digital repository, is shown here as well. That particular website is a whole different beast. It's just the nature of digital repositories. So lots of them, this particular one has a bit of Java in it. The user interface is a Node.js module. So it's completely different. It's my other alter ego, I guess you could say. Can you have multiple? I guess you can. So what's nice about all these websites, the things that tie them all together, is they're all about open access to data. Be it scholarly works, which is what the 2 presses are all about, or getting our manuscripts from the archives and special collections online. there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And sometimes when you work on these websites, you get stuck in the content of just checking out the images of the dead cricket that Emily Dickinson had wrapped into one of her letters that she sent somebody out in the world. So some neat stuff hidden in there. So these are some of the books that we have published so far with the press. And when I say we, I technically manage the press. I am not the press. I am part of the digital programs group in the library. The Amherst College Press is also located in the library under the same umbrella. And we have this really nice relationship between the press and the librarians, and then our group as well. And the press was started in 2014. It has 2 employees, and then the relationship with the group that I work with. We are one of very, very few liberal arts colleges and universities that are founded with, university presses that are founded with the commitment to open access. It's what we do. It's all we do. And the goal is to publish peer-reviewed scholarship, making the exchange of ideas free, and not just for those that can afford it. And that's the point of open access. So essentially, making the scholarly work freely available. So we're helping to break down the barriers that inhibit communication of these ideas, namely that a large part of a library's budget is spent on getting access to these journals that are out there with the scholarly work in it. It can be very expensive not only to access these journals that are out there, but also to publish in them. So we're trying to make that easier. And the more colleges that do this type of thing, the better. So these are 4 publications we have. I think we're going to have another one soon. So you can see that this is really still getting going. Each book here is available as an actual print book. We have a PDF online that you can download, and we also have an online presence. So if you happen to look for something you want to browse right now, you can check these out. And so what I want to talk about is what we've done so far, keeping in mind that we're still a work in progress. I think a lot of these workflows that you have, I think a lot of publishers are still trying to figure out the workflow in general and what to do with their online presence and how to get this data out there in a way that's really sustainable. What's really nice about open access is it pairs nicely with open source, which is one reason that we really like working with WordPress and want to support that. So you're probably wondering about goats. Goats are 100% behind open access, especially when it's an open gate that leads to a lush field or your garden or your flower bed or even your house. If they could get in your house, they would be very happy with it. So they're all for this type of thing. So this is a very general idea of the workflow that goes into open access publishing. I'll do a lot of hand waving around the actual creation of the book. That's not my area of expertise at all. Ideally, the workflow would look like this, where you use Adobe InDesign, which is a great desktop publishing tool. And it would be great, have that generate your PDF, your EPUB, so your electronic publishing book for your devices, and the HTML version. Right now, we generate the EPUB from it, the PDF from it. What it ultimately ends up looking like is that InDesign is not very good at creating the EPUB or the HTML version in reality, so we can't count on that for it. It does actually generate both things. It would take a significant quantity of my time to play with the CSS to get it to look nice and presentable. And that's not sustainable when you're working with all these books, as far as creating something that you can keep doing over and over. So what we do is we take the PDF and we put that into WordPress, and then the director or whomever is making these books will basically duplicate the content that's in InDesign and put it into Pressbooks. And I'll talk about Pressbooks in a minute in a little more detail about that. Pressbooks is capable of generating an EPUB, which is actually pretty decent. We're not publishing the EPUB yet. And Pressbooks is the HTML version of this. Has anybody in here worked with Pressbooks before or heard of it, maybe? Okay, great. So some of the features that we've needed as we're doing this are publication URIs that are semi-permanent. We don't want to be moving around the links to these books very much. And this is so that we can eventually use digital object identifiers, which is basically a unique and persistent string of characters to be able to, Well, characters that you apply to a journal article, a website, any intellectual property to help you identify it. So when you go to a document and it has a DOI, or if you want to look up one, you can authoritatively know that you've got the right thing. And so it's nice to have a stable HTTP link for this type of stuff. So we're eventually moving towards that, and whenever I'm making changes, I keep that in mind. What's really nice about DOIs is that tools like Altmetric Bookmarklet, if you're doing anything with scholarly publishing, you've probably heard about that. And what that is it's another form of analytics, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that uses DOIs heavily. And we need a catalog page for the publication so people know what's available on our website, obviously. We need mailing list support so that we can keep track of who's looking at our stuff and just be in contact with them, as well as statistics and for downloads and online views. And when I say statistics here, I mean user-facing, so not like our general Google Analytics statistics. So a lot of the stuff that a press needs are things that other people are doing already. It's not unique in that sense. Some of it is unique in how it's done, and what we might be looking for is slightly different, but it's there. And I'll talk about this right. So this is our main system view of what we're doing. We have a WordPress main site, which has a catalog on it, which hosts all the book splash pages. So the main site is not generally intended to hold the actual content that we have that we're trying to get people out to see. And so what it is these book splash pages will actually lead you to the media that you're looking for. In this case, we also have another WordPress press instance that is running a Pressbooks plugin. And Pressbooks basically helps you make a book of your content. It looks like a book as you're reading through it. And I'll show a little bit more about that. So I created this pass-through contact page so that I could start to gather some of these statistics that we're interested in learning about what people are doing on our website. The book PDFs are hosted in the WordPress media library right now, and the online version of the books are in Pressbooks, that separate WordPress install. And in some cases, we might have an external asset. Right now, we have one of our books that's out on iTunes. So there's that in there. Or you can print the book out. And I say print hard copy via ... because we've kind of gone through a few iterations of who do we print through, who do we want to work with. And some of the books are printed through different places. And that's part of the workflow kind of constantly being worked on. We haven't settled on the ideal workflow yet. In the future, I'd like to integrate with our digital repository. And ideally, we'd have all our stuff there, at least the PDF and the EPUB and whatever else we want to put there. The key thing there is that we get long-term digital preservation when we do that. We also might have access directly from it, but it would be great to have this stuff digitally preserved in a safe space. And this is another instance of where having a press in a library is really great, because this digital repository, it's not hard for the press director to find somebody to be able to do that. It's there, and in fact, it's probably an idea that the digital programs group thought of in working on the press. Like, hey, why don't we preserve your material at the same time? It's a nice melding of resources and helping out in an area where maybe the press wouldn't have thought of it in the first place. They obviously would want to keep their stuff safe. And in the library, we already have tools on how to do that. So I bet you're wondering, maybe not, if goats have a system set up. And yes, they do. When you work with a herd of goats, you have one that's generally dominating, or this dominant goat. We have a small herd of does, and one of them definitely stands out. She's our queen. And she will allow access to things like the hay feeder, the watering bucket, or anything cool, pretty much. She is the portal, so to speak, to everything out there. So to talk a little bit about Pressbooks for WordPress, it's a WordPress plugin that transforms a multi-site WordPress site into a content management site for books. So basically, its intention is to help create books. That's its whole goal in life. And it does it really, really well. And also what it does is it makes books available in multiple formats. So you can then export a book as a PDF or an EPUB or a MOBI in other formats that I don't personally know much about. So it's really handy for that. There's pressbooks.com, which is a fully hosted solution that you can use. You can also download the plugin yourself, which is what we've done, and set up your own site for it. So this is an example of what a book looks like in Pressbooks. Pretty straightforward. Nicely looks like a book. I think they have a handful of themes right now that you can work with, so you can change things around. And you get all the things you'd expect with a book, a table of contents, and then sometimes the download buttons for different formats. So for some of the features that I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've done to achieve that so far. For the publication URIs, we use Pretty Links plugin. And basically that just makes your links nice and clean. So instead of having to point to some unwieldy named PDF, you can just point to the network reckless and you get the book. It's nice and clean. So basically provides a mask where this provides a way that we can move stuff around behind the scenes without actually changing the front part of the website. And a bonus that I just discovered with this is you can get some statistics on the admin part of the site, which is handy. I mean, we're already collecting Google Analytics statistics, so in some ways this is kind of a duplication of that, but it's kind of neat that it's there. And the catalog page setup. So we use Divi theme, which is a pretty handy, flexible theme that you can, I think, buy from Elegant Themes. I'm not quite sure. And it uses this really nice visual builder, pretty handy interface. And I think for managing content, it's something that's been intuitive and easy for the content manager to work with. So what I did for this filterable portfolio, after looking around for a while, is I ended up using a filterable portfolio module. Excuse me, what I did for catalog is I used a filterable portfolio module that's part of this theme. And what it does is it basically takes a WordPress page and now calls it a project. And then you can categorize those projects and display the excerpts. I did have to do a little bit of coding change to get the excerpts to show the way I wanted to and to add the read more link. I'll show you a live version of this. So because we're small, we didn't need a hugely robust solution yet. I looked at a lot of plugins and couldn't find quite the right thing. And a lot of the plugins that I did look at would add a whole lot of bloat to the system that we just wouldn't use. So I'm always trying to be conscious of keeping it small. What's handy about this, because we are so small, is these project categories work great. So things that are series, you tag them as a series, and then you can find the works pretty easily. And then you can click on them from there. So this works well for now. In the future, when we have more content up there, this is probably going to need to be revisited. And I was thinking, ultimately at some point we need to move to a book content management system for this, because I think we'll get a catalog for free then. Hopefully it's one we like, otherwise, there. So for the mailing list, to solve that, I looked around a bit. I think an obvious choice is MailChimp, but for a few reasons that didn't work for us. And then I found the MailPoet plugin, and I've been really happy with it. It provides us with newsletter building capabilities that are really intuitive and have been easy to use, and the director of the press really likes working with them. He's fairly technical, but he's not a developer, so going in and being able to do this, he's really liked how it feels to work with this particular plugin. It does your subscriber management, which is great, and that's been intuitive as well. And for me, one thing that I personally really liked is I can integrate this with Contact Form 7. And also it has an API that I can program to. So this has helped me solve a problem of automatically collecting user data, meaning that I don't have to go in, I don't have to read emails to enter people into our database anymore. This just all happens. For a while, I just had a template page that I was using. Let me go back to the system design. So this pass-through contact page, for a long time what I did is I created a template page. So the book splash page will take you to various formats of each book. And I wanted to collect the data of who was using what. So I created this contact page to basically say, who are you? Who are you affiliated with? Do you want to be on our mailing list? And that page would, when I wrote it as a template page, I would just stick data in a database. And then I would have to export that database every once in a while as a CSV file and email it to myself. I had a cron job set up for that. And that process works fine, but then we didn't have this whole mailing list in place yet. We weren't using MailPoet. So it wasn't an easy solution. It required a few steps on my part to really pull the list together and work with. So when I started working with MailPoet, I was pretty happy that all of that work is done for me now. By putting this these last few lines, it's a little bit more than that. That's the gist of it. And now my users go into the MailPoet database automatically. And if you want to get some goats on your mailing list, you might be interested to know where in the world you can find them. So your best bet is to look in Asia. You can probably get the most goats from there. I was actually surprised to see this, that the Americas only have 4.3% of the world's goats. But actually, it's not really that surprising. And speaking of statistics, I'm really going to milk this goat analogy here. One of the things we want to know with the press is are people reading our books? Are we having an impact? Are we effective? So a press really has to make, especially one in open access, has to make a case for its existence and to show people, like the director of library, that this initiative is a good initiative. And so we need some strong statistics to do that. And it's more than Google Analytics. And we also want to show authors coming in that we have traffic to our website, because the authors are going to come in and check us out and say, well, do I really want to publish with you? 3 people read that book. Or so yeah, excuse me. So as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about user-facing statistics, hence authors coming in and whatnot. And so when I looked around at my options to figure out what to do, of course, Google Analytics is a no-brainer. We definitely use that already behind the scenes. And what I found in looking at that was that I couldn't get quite what I wanted. There are a few plugins for it, and they have some really great admin-facing utilities there. Some of it is pretty much duplicating what I can already see when I go to Google Analytics directly. And the stuff that I could make user-facing, I don't think is that interesting. I think page views and things like that are not really what your users want to see. Altmetrics, another tool I mentioned earlier, is a tool for finding about where people are talking about your stuff, your scholarship. And Altmetrics is a data science company out of London, and their mission is to track and analyze activity around scholarly publishing. So what attention are articles receiving? Who is talking about this particular piece of work? And that's more like they're watching Twitter feeds, they're watching Facebook, and some scholarly journal. I'm not actually sure where people talk about journals. That's out there. And publishers can show authors about the conversations that are happening about their material. So the other option I had is to write a plugin for this type of work. And facing the fact that the problem with that is that I would be creating another probably highly customized plugin. I think a lot of people here might be doing that behind the scenes anyways. I'd actually be curious about that. Might be an interesting survey. But I also didn't want to reinvent the wheel if this sort of thing was already being done. And I had looked around a bit and I couldn't find that. That isn't to say it isn't there, but I think sometimes it's hard to find the right thing. And also thinking about, do I want to make this general enough that someday I can release it and share it with other people? With that comes the necessity to then maintain it. So there's that added commitment. But I did end up going down that road, and I wrote a plugin that I call Open Access Tools plugin. And what I did with that is 2 things. I provide a gatekeeper pass-through page, which I talked about earlier. So I took that template page and wrapped it into my plugin. So now we can collect freely given information. We integrate it with the mailing list, and I created a short code to create that pass-through page. That was one of the things I looked for early on is how can I find a tool where I can hand it a URL and say, take me to this, but collect data first? And I couldn't find that. And so that's where my need for this pass-through page came in. And now I have a short code that will just fairly automatically do that. And another thing I get from this tool is that I can have these download and online viewing statistics through a short code as well. And again, why not just use Google? The applicability, which is what I talked about earlier. One other thing that occurred to me with the Google plugins is security around it. What you generally do is you hand them a key, a token, to access your Google Analytics data. And while that's fine and dandy, I don't exactly know what the plugin's doing underneath. I didn't have time to read all the code in there. And I'm also handing this password, in a sense, to the college's Google Analytic account. So there was some concern on my part there of handing that off, and what is this plugin really doing? You know, it's probably a minor concern, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. So I just wanted to show a short code example of how this helped clean up my code a little bit. This particular short code will create that pass-through page that I've been talking a lot about, and it cleans up this rather wieldy ahref link that used to be in there. So I'm hoping this is easier for people who manage content to come in and just use this particular short code. And I wanted to show kind of a little bit about what this is actually doing. So this is a book splash page. And obviously some information off the side. Down at the bottom here is one short code, one of the particular widget I was talking about. So this is generated by a short code that basically gives it the book's information and tells it whether or not it wants to view, whether or not we want to see the views online, the number of downloads, one or the other of those. You don't actually have to show both of those, because in one case we don't have one of the books online yet. So there's one so this comes from the open access tool plugin I created. And these links up here to go to an interactive PDF or to click to read the book online, this will take us to this pass-through page. It was also really important to us to have the opportunity to skip this page if you wanted to. People don't have to give us information. But just the fact that they went through here, I know that I will put information in the database saying, unknown, but somebody went and read this book. So I can still keep track of that. And so you can come in here and get to the Pressbooks books installation for this book. One of the things that I thought about with goats in short code and how they're related is a goat will not eat anything, contrary to popular belief. They're actually pretty fussy. But what I thought about is goats will actually nibble on anything. And so like WordPress, a goat would eat a short code, at least it would put it in its mouth, it would chew it up and spit it out in another form, which is exactly what WordPress is doing with a short code. So next time you think of short codes. So I was just showing you the pass-through page and what's happening in it logging data to our WordPress database, and then ultimately culminating in being able to pull these statistics back out. So I hope to, in the future, what I really want to do is tie this in with Google Analytics, because I think in some senses I'll get more vetted statistics. Right now, Google Analytics would tell me unique IPs coming into the book. My code isn't that sophisticated yet. So I'm at version 1, that might be version 2 or 3, just to make sure that I'm not inadvertently bumping up statistics. And so whenever I come in here to test something, then I end up with a bunch of rows in the database with my name on it. So occasionally I have to go in and delete myself from there to make sure I'm not inflating them. Okay, so goats are very, very curious creatures. And they have a way of looking at you, and then you can just read the question in their mind of like, what are you doing? So I put this slide in here because I wanted to stop and pause and just to say that, you know, I've asked myself this many times. This website has been a work in progress since I've been working on it. And the general workflow of the press is if we found some tool that was better and worked better, we would switch and use it. So it's this reminder that it's constantly evolving. And so what I have here is stuff where I already have a list of ideas of things that I want to make better. And so I'm learning as I go, both about publishing. That's not my area of expertise, and I don't need to be great at it, but it's good to have a clue about what we're doing. I'm also still learning about WordPress and the plugins, which can be sometimes an overwhelming process. There are so many plugins out there. How do you find the right tool and solution, especially when maybe only a quarter of your time is devoted to WordPress in the first place? So you could end up spending a lot of time just looking around, seeing what exists. And so this is to acknowledge that our solutions that we've come up with, they work for now, but I think the catalog page is not going to scale. When we have 50 or 100 books, it's going to be pretty tricky to look through that and try to find the right thing. So that's going to have to be revamped and adding maybe some searching capability. So what I've found is talk about a little bit about where I found where WordPress excels. And some of these are like, yeah, of course, everybody feels this way. So we found, of course, WordPress has an easy interface. People can use it. The right people are doing the content, which is not me, thankfully, and has such a very low barrier to entry, which makes it so that I can help out where more technical help is needed, but I don't have to do the day-to-day stuff when someone wants to create a new book. I also personally love that there's a large community supporting it, that it's open source, so it's not going to go anywhere soon. It's going to be around. It's really vibrant, and that's key. So where WordPress excels is kind of like and thinking about this, these are huge. It would take a long list of negative things to completely outweigh this. And so when I talk about pain points here, I keep that in mind. These are minor overall. So some of the stuff, I think, things where I've run into problems are general WordPress woes that probably everybody runs into. Finding and vetting plugins, finding the right thing, I'm always conscious of not trying to add too many plugins to bloat my website because they have all these features that I don't need when I really only need one feature. I have a development site and a live site, and I don't do this in the way that I think I've heard people talk about here because we are so small with just these well, 2 websites with this. I use the development website more as a testing ground. So it gets out of date, out of sync. It doesn't have what's currently in the live database. So there's that extra step of cleaning it up occasionally and moving stuff around. WordPress in general is not made for this type of application. You know, we're not selling things in general. We're not a photographer. We're not bloggers. So it's been a little tricky to find our niche in here and to find the right tools. Pressbooks is really great, but it has its limitations, and it's really good for general use cases. So I've discovered, somebody could prove me wrong here, please do. Pressbooks operates in a multi-site WordPress, and the combination there is a little bit tricky and complicated, not necessarily intuitive to someone going in and trying to manipulate and update the content. And I was talking earlier with somebody about this particular setup. She has a very similar scenario, and we kind of hide the fact we don't hide the fact was just when we're looking at where the books are located, you don't actually know that you've left the main WordPress site. That's masked a little bit. So you don't know, unless you know what Pressbooks is, that you've entered a Pressbooks website. It's a seamless scenario. And so that means that we're bypassing Pressbooks' native catalog page. We couldn't use that. It wasn't quite the right thing at the time, and perhaps it's gotten better in between. Sometimes creating the online presence is a pain point, going from the general editing tool to the online presence. The work is duplicated right now. The content from InDesign is literally duplicated into Pressbooks. It'd be nice if there was a more seamless integration and requiring less work. And my future plans. So like I've said before, I want to integrate with the digital repository. What I'd like to do is inspire scholarly research, make digital humanities easier. So someone could spin up a WordPress site and they can pull images from our digital repository. There's no extra step of having to go somewhere else, saving the images and then uploading them. That way, I'd like to think it would enable people to use our digital repository, especially around the college, if we have professors with stuff in there and they want to present it in a certain way. I want to do more statistics reporting, integrate more with Google Analytics. I want to really start using Tag Manager, and I would love to create a map of where people are coming from. One of the snags that I ran into in the college is that we don't have Google's developer dashboard enabled. So right now I can't technically program to gather, thank you, our statistics from there. Just an extra step. Hopefully I can get that access. We would like to use altmetrics as well and pull in some statistics from there. That might be a little bit complicated because being a press in a university or in a college, it could be an expensive solution, so I'm not sure we'll go down that road. But if you're browsing online, you might run into altmetrics sometimes, and you can kind of see it has this really nice icon of views and lots of information. And I want to revisit the splash page and the catalog page and make a more robust solution for that. And with the open access tool, I want to clean it up some more, try to bring in more of the WordPress best practices as I learn what they are. And these are two of our goats, my goats. One of the things in coming here was I know that there are other people doing this sort of stuff, and how can we share these tools better? And some of it is me entering into this world and not knowing where those resources are. Maybe somebody already has a cool website with information on what nice tools they've created. So I have this hope that we can come up with some way to connect with each other if you're doing this kind of stuff, or even something that's relatively close. And so if you have any questions or want to see any other bits of the features that I've talked about. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you didn't talk much about the actual part of publishing that is called the editor and peer review, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
The preparation of the manuscript. That's not under your, that's not something you're part.
Right. Basically, I technically manage the website itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are the possibilities of cheap textbook preparation through this kind of system?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that I can fully answer that because I don't know the editorial side of things. Our focus hasn't been on textbooks. That isn't to say, I don't know if we would never work with a textbook. We're looking for more scholarly works, and I realize a textbook could be that. So I'm not sure about budget-wise, like how expensive this process is now, and how this compares to a publishing process where you're not open access. Does that answer your question?
Are there paid, for instance, are there paid editors and are the authors paid?
I don't know whether or not the authors are paid. I had meant to find out, but there are. Yeah, we definitely have. I don't know if it's the director himself. Somebody is editing these books. I think there are consultants that we work with as well, and they're also peer reviewed. And I think that the key thing with open access is the peer review part, because people want to know that when they're coming in and they're reading the work that you're publishing, that it's actually good, solid work. So there's a lot of emphasis put on the peer review part of that. Mm-hmm. Yes.
On the creation side with press books, is the only way in to create the PDF of the book first and then go into press books? Are there other ways to get or create press books?
Yeah, you can go in and manually create in press books the way you would in WordPress.
Oh.
So it does have a system where you can walk through and literally type in the content. And I'm not actually sure, as they say it, how the director is currently doing it now. I know that InDesign is producing the PDF. I don't know, Pressbooks will import PDFs, it will import EPUBs and whatnot. I don't know if he's starting from there for the content in Pressbooks, or if he's literally copying and pasting into there. So there's a few ways to get your stuff in there.
You mentioned that there are very few liberal arts colleges with publishing houses that are doing open access publishing. Mm-hmm. Is that because they're not interested in open access publishing, or just that they don't have publishing?
I think many of them just don't have a publishing house to do it. It's my understanding that yeah, when it comes down to budgets and whatnot, it's when what you're creating doesn't necessarily bring in money, it's even harder to fund that. So we're really lucky that Amherst College is supporting this. And I think that there aren't a lot of liberal arts colleges in general doing this sort of publishing. You find bigger publishers like the University of Michigan. Some bigger universities are actually able to have this in their budgets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please be sure to fill out the survey. There's a link on the slides, and it's also a link from your schedule.
Yes, thank you.